Have you ever wondered how your sales performance compares against your competitors and peers? The B2B Sales Benchmark Report provides the definitive guide to what success looks like in 2021. See how you compare in terms of win rate, sales cycle, average deal value, relationships, and engagement. You can see the results and get the full report at ebster.com/B2B-sales-benchmarks. This is Sales Ops Demystified, the #1 most downloaded podcast in sales operations. We invite the brightest minds in sales operations onto the show to deconstruct the why, what, and how behind rep productivity, forecasting, metrics, and all things revenue. This podcast is brought to you by Ebster, the leading customer engagement platform for Salesforce. Hello and welcome to another episode of Sales Ops Demystified. Today we're joined by Cris Santos, who has over 10 years sales ops experience at companies such as DocuSign, Quantcast, and now at Pluralsight. Cris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
So I'm going to kick off with the first question. How did you initially get into sales ops? Because I can see from your history, you did have time in business in different roles. So how did you make that journey?
Yeah, so unlike a lot of people who end up in sales ops because they either started in finance or in consulting, I actually, I never thought or saw myself as actually joining the corporate world. When I was in college, I wanted to be a diplomat because I really wanted to change the world. And I thought that, I could change the world to become a better place. And I wanted to be a diplomat. And that's what I kind of studied to be. And that's why I joined the military. And I was a naval officer for 4 years. And that's where I actually started working in strategy and operations in a military setting. And a lot of people get a little bit confused and say, how are the two worlds connected? And they're extremely connected. So much because, the areas and the concepts of strategy and operations were basically created in the military. And so much that actually I spent a lot of my time, I was assigned to a training unit, and we actually hosted a lot of training sessions with business people about team building activities, leadership, strategic thinking, agile methodology, a lot of those concepts. And actually it was those business people that started triggering their interest in me because they said, have you ever considered leaving the military and moving to business? Because we probably needed someone like you. So that kind of made me very curious about it. And, I always wanted to live abroad, and I was spending some time abroad with the military and having exposure to that. And, I came to Ireland to visit my sister who had been living here. And then the business world here is so dynamic, and there are so many companies looking for people with my background in terms of, multilingual, etc., that it was quite easy to get a job. And this was back in 2008, so at the time of the crisis. And I started in kind of a sales role because it was the easiest back then. And then I realized that I really wanted to spend time in the behind the scenes. Where do we go next? What is the next market? And those things. So I was given assignments that were not exactly sales related. They started giving me SWOT analysis because I was so curious about it. At the time, I was working for Allianz, a subsidiary of Allianz, the insurance company.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to be in a subsidiary that was growing outside of Europe. And, I worked with Latin America and Africa. And, it appealed so much to my prior experience of working in international relations and diplomacy, etc. And so I just got really interested. And I just decided it's time to find a job in an operations, because that's my passion. That's where I'm I really like working with salespeople, but I like being behind the scenes with them to make them more effective than actually being myself a seller. So that's why I moved to operations, and that's when I moved to BMC Software, so a very well established company, where I learned a lot from my manager at the time, who was really important, from my colleagues who were a lot more experienced in sales ops than I was in business. And it was a great school, but it was a very well established company, and I really like kind of getting my hands dirty and help scaling businesses. And obviously BMC was already a pretty well established company, and that's how I made the move to other companies that kind of were less established, less mature, and that's how I developed my career. And yeah, after I've had experiences at Quantcast, and then 4 years at DocuSign, which was definitely a very special experience and
Yeah.
very successful. And now here at Pluralsight to help with the same, scaling the business internationally and making it successful.
So was it 4 years in the Navy?
Yep.
And then how many years selling?
2.5 years.
2.5 years, and then the rest
The
sales
rest, yeah.
operations. Cool.
Yeah.
And then in the army, we've had no one else on the podcast who has military service, so it's super interesting. The work that you're doing today in sales ops and Pluralsight, were you doing similar things in the operations in the Navy?
The concepts are the same. So the strategic thinking is always about having been with several companies so far. Some companies make the mistake of only dealing with the tactical day to day, but they never have a strategic plan. So I would say the what the Navy and the military really gave me was, you always need to have a plan. And sometimes it's plan A and B and C, because you need to be agile. Because sometimes what you expect, and especially in business, financial modeling, is very interesting, but you probably need to take into account that you probably need scenario 1, 2, and 3, because sometimes circumstances change. And in the military, circumstances can change and the stakes are very high, right? We're talking about lives and very serious things. So I think for sure the concepts I learned there, the agility, the kind of being resourceful, like getting things done, because the stakes are so high that you have to get things done. Otherwise, you're not progressing, you're not being successful. Lives are at risk. And I oftentimes tell my teams when they get worried about things that, it's not lives that are at stake, but the kind of basics of how I work, I do apply still my military concepts, because it's like, we need to get things done. We need to get this done, and it needs to be done now. There is a sense of urgency. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it was my military background, maybe it was my sales background. There is a sense of urgency that sometimes I see in other groups, in ops groups or in finance groups, that do not have the same sense of urgency. But for sure, the strategic thinking, the all kind of a sense of not always being, I'm never entirely happy with how things are. There's always something that we can improve. So I'm naturally unhappy with how things are, even if they are doing really well. But I always think we can improve a little bit more. There has to be improvement, because especially in tech, that's why I really moved away from insurance and financial services and moved to tech. It's so fast paced. It's so competitive. You need to be always on the forefront, and that's definitely something that I take from the military. You need to always be ahead of your enemies. Always innovating. So and you always think about resourcing and planning and logistics. So it's the same here in sales operations. It's the same. Always thinking about how many sellers we need, how are we going to make them successful, how are we going to train them. In the military, it's the same. It's exactly the same. The concepts are the same. I don't see any difference, almost, honestly. um, and I mean this in a positive way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we could write a book, couldn't we, about how translating learnings in the military to sales. But that's probably a separate podcast. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what do you think makes an awesome sales ops person?
Someone who challenges the status quo, for sure.
Mhm.
Someone who obviously has opinions and is able to read a situation and make an opinion about it, but also someone who listens. I do think that it's important for ops people to listen
Mhm.
to the business and the units that they support. I oftentimes I come across ops and strategic people that never listen. They just have an idea and go with it. And for example, I also have ideas of my own and perspectives on certain ways of doing business, but I always listen because the product is not the same, the company is not the same, the values might not be the same. So you always need to listen, because at the end of the day, companies are made of people. So as ops and strategy people, we need to influence a lot if we want to get things done. So you obviously need to listen to your stakeholders and your partners, and make sure that you speak in a language that they understand.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you don't get anything done. So I would say that from having kind of that, you know, inherent quality of getting things done and being knowledgeable and having ideas, but also being able to listen to other
Mhm.
people's. Because I've seen that ops people sometimes, actually, oftentimes, the ops department becomes the unbiased department in a company, the one that doesn't have any dogs in the fight, that all we want is to drive efficiency and
Mhm.
revenue, regardless if it's sales or marketing driven. We're not driven by that. We want what's best for the company. So I would say it's definitely listening and always challenging, asking questions. So listening, asking questions, challenging the status quo and
Mhm.
saying, did it work, the playbook that we've been using? Has it been working? Has it been successful? And even if it has, how can we make it better?
Mhm.
How can we overcome? So yeah, so it's a combination of being active, but also listening
Yeah.
to people, talking to other departments, because I think it's in ops, we do hold the keys to a holistic view of the business, combining all elements, that it's not just, the pipeline and the lead that comes in, it's how it's actually moving through the
Mhm.
funnel, it's how the order is put together. So it's different things.
Yeah. On the status quo piece, have you got an example or a story of when you've done that and it's led to where you challenged something that was currently happening and you challenged that and changed it and then it led to better result?
Um, you know, I would say I've come across this situation a few times, which is precisely because I've been working for long with American companies, right? Is them coming to terms that when you decide to go to Europe or internationally, that the playbook, even for a very well established and successful company in the US, that playbook might not actually play the
Mhm.
same way, might not get the same results when you go to Europe, because people are like, oh, in EMEA, we're going to use the same. Well, let me tell you something. Europe is several countries, and I always use the analogy of tea with milk, which sounds very appealing in UK and Ireland,
Mhm.
but to be honest, I'm a Southern European. Tea with milk, not an appealing idea to me. So the same input, gets a different output.
Mhm.
And I think that sometimes um, challenging that, it is a challenge, because you need to talk to your sometimes your bosses and managers back at HQ in
Mhm.
US, and explain to them that, hey guys, the scoring model that we have in place, it's not going to work here. We're going to have to tweak it, or a certain way of prospecting, right, on the sales development side. Here, if we decide to go to Germany, for example, we're probably going to have to tweak the way we write our emails.
Mhm.
So I would say that is an example, especially with my experience working with American HQ companies. Oftentimes my first challenge is not, it's not like I get pushback. Is precisely telling, we're going to have to probably be cognizant that we might have to customize our playbook to something different,
Yeah.
to appeal to a European audience, if we're talking about
Mhm.
Europe, or to a Brazilian audience. For example, recently we working with Brazil and being very close to that culture. Obviously, it's a culture that is very driven by oral communication. So emails are not very successful. So when you go back and you explain to your US HQ that we're going to have to get phones up and running because in Brazil it's all about talking over the phone.
Mhm.
For them, it was kind of really they can't do emails. Well, they can, but it's not
Mhm.
um, culturally and business like, right? It's not as successful. So if we
Yeah.
want to be successful, we're probably going to have to get some phones up and running. So that is an example. Yeah.
So were Quantcast, DocuSign, and Pluralsight all HQ'd in the US?
Yes. Correct. Yeah.
So you've had to
Yeah.
manage that. I mean, you must be pretty good at doing it now, right?
I think so. Yeah, it started with BMC, also HQ'd in the US. So yeah, I'm pretty used to. All my managers so far have been based out of the
Yeah.
US.
Gone from
So
school.
for 10 years, yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much, yeah.
Um, do you think that sales experience is necessary to succeed in sales operations?
Uh, Not really. No, I think it makes it easier, makes it faster for you to
Mhm.
understand the sales side. So if you have prior experience in sales, you know the language, you know what makes them tick. And I found that because I worked in sales, I knew their sense of urgency. Their I could understand better and faster once I moved to an ops role. Having worked and having team members in the teams that I've managed that never had a sales background and came, they struggled initially with, it's like they want things for yesterday, and sometimes adapting your language to make sure that, hey, you need to be straightforward with salespeople, with sales leaders. They have this way of working and you're not going to
Mhm.
change them. Actually, we want them to be that. We want them to be kind of stubborn and we want them not to accept a no. That's what
Exactly.
makes
Yeah.
them a good seller, right? So I would say it's not critical. It just makes it easier in the beginning for you to create a relationship with them. Just makes it
Mhm.
faster. That's it. But I don't think it is a critical um, experience.
And
But
that's what you
yeah.
experienced when you moved over. You found it
I
much
didn't
easier for you.
have, yeah, I didn't have kind of, let's call it a cultural clash because I knew where they were coming from. So it was quite easy to adapt to that. Whereas I've seen other people kind of uh, s- taking longer, let's put it like that, and trying to come to terms if that was the right choice or not. But for example, I do think that whatever background you have, that if you are supporting sales, that you should do the same sales certification that they do. So you understand what methodology, and that's something that I always
Mhm.
enforce my team members, is that whatever methodology, whether it's Sandler, Challenger, that you do that as well, so that you understand where they're coming from, and that you also understand the value of the product you're selling. Because if you don't need to be an expert, right? Because you're not putting order together and discussing pricing with customers, but you need to understand what the value of the company, the value proposition, USPs are, because that way you also think better on how to strategize around the sales teams and how to make them more efficient. If you don't know what product your company is selling and you don't know the values, then no, you're not doing a great job. It's going to be much harder to assist and be a good sales ops partner.
Cool. Yeah, but to know that stuff, you don't have to have actually gone and sold it.
No,
You can.
no,
Got it.
no,
Okay.
no.
Let's shift over to technology. So right now, Pluralsight, what are you currently using?
I think right now the tech stack across several SaaS companies is pretty much the
Yeah.
same. You need to get your CRM. So I'm agnostic. Obviously, I've been using past the advertising Salesforce for several years. That's the CRM system I've seen being used the widest. But whatever it is, you need to have your CRM platform in place. You need to have obviously a marketing automation tool. Again,
Mhm.
agnostic to that. I've worked with Eloqua, Marketo, HubSpot. Depends on the company.
Mhm.
You need to have in place a lead distribution engine. That's definitely something that I've seen as being critical. And again,
Mhm.
it depends, but a lead distribution engine to streamline. So you don't just have lead queues set up in your CRM, but you actually have a lead distribution engine so you can turn on and off. You
Mhm.
can push leads into certain individuals. You can, you can customize the lead assignment much
And
more
so
efficiently and faster.
would that be custom built, or is there?
No, there's, again, I'll pass the over. NC Square is definitely something that, yeah, Pluralsight has, and DocuSign
Yeah,
also had. So
cool.
it's quite powerful. And then any sort of inside sales tool. So either inside sales or outreach have definitely been the ones that I've become familiar with over the years, and they kind of provide a similar service with,
Hmm.
with differences, and both being very powerful, but again, also important tools to make the work of the sales development or business development, whatever you want to call, more efficient. And you can track metrics, how long is it taking, how many calls you're placing, you know all those metrics are very important to track. So there's a few, a lot of companies use discover.org to get kind of mappings of organizations.
Hmm.
Traction hierarchies is also another tool that is very useful, especially once you start scaling your business and your sales organization, and you have certain AEs looking after a certain group of accounts, and then in other regions you have another AE, and kind of making sure that the AEs connect together and they're able to see directly in the CRM who owns what, and if there
Hmm.
are open opportunities. I've definitely seen that working really well. Um, what else? A CPQ system, critical. So a system that allows you to place orders, that allows the sales team to self-serve and get the SKUs they want, in a faster, and those automated approval workflows
Hmm.
in terms of discounts. Um,
What does a
uh,
CPQ stand for?
it's I think it's, oh my god, it's something, something quoting. So it's to allow to quote. So
Hmm.
Aptus is a popular tool, for example, but there are others out there in the market
Cool.
that offer the same type of services. And obviously, I mean, I worked there for 4 years, but an e-signature company is quite critical nowadays. So
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
DocuSign is really good at it.
Mm.
And Pluralsight does use DocuSign, and
Yeah.
obviously DocuSign was using DocuSign, and I
Yeah.
was using DocuSign before I joined DocuSign. So an e-signature company that makes sure that whatever orders the sellers are placing are immediately signed by customers, that is critical, and that
Yeah.
should be embedded in your entire contract, contract order lifecycle.
Yeah.
To streamline the process. So yeah, if no, if yeah, well, that was one of the first things I asked Pluralsight. You're using an e-signature solution, right? Because that shows that you're invested in making your sales processes as efficient as possible. Yeah.
I just want to jump into the DocuSign experience because I can imagine over that 3 to 4 years they would have grown pretty substantially. So when you did join, how many people were there in the? I guess I think it was EMEA sales team, and then how many people were there when you left?
Um, very few.
Mm.
We were probably all together in outside of the US. So DocuSign was already pretty big in North America, obviously. Here, we were probably 50, probably 30 here in Dublin and 20 people in London. So it was very small. I joined DocuSign in the year of all acquisitions, as we kind of
Mm.
say. DocuSign made three acquisitions internationally, so it grew a lot in a very short period of time, and then it scaled. Past the acquisitions, then it naturally grew a lot in the core. So when I left, we had hundreds of people just in Dublin, hundreds of them. So
Mm.
DocuSign is public, so it's publicly available that when the new fiscal year was launched, it represented international represented 17% of the company's revenue. When I started, it was 2%, so it was a pretty aggressive growth and
Mm.
an amazing experience, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Um,
How was that having to bring in, I guess, sales resources from other acquired companies into your team and onboard them on the process?
Yeah, it's always complicated, right? Because you're, again, as I said, you're dealing with people, and people, that had a certain company or corporate culture. But I have to say, I worked with all of them, and I was very fortunate to have really good experiences with the sellers that I worked with, and create a connection. But precisely because I listened to them, whenever, hey, you're going to Paris and meet the team, we did, the sell and
Mhm.
integrate them into some new manager or something like that. I was very fortunate that I had really sensible and experienced people on the other side. But also, I guess I just listened to them, and they felt that they could voice whatever concerns they had. And at
Mhm.
the same time, DocuSign did have a very kind of open culture that we want, we made the acquisition, we want to make it successful, and the results are there to show. So, but yeah, but again, I would say it's very important that you listen, that you just don't go there and force things upon people, because you can force them, but there's a way of being more, um, you can influence rather than impose. And
Yeah.
I guess the military trained me well in terms of influencing people
Mhm.
without them feeling that they're being pushed, even
Nice.
if I am pushing on
Yeah.
something.
No, I didn't hear much allegiance to any tech tools, but if you had to choose a favorite and you can't choose DocuSign.
Yeah, DocuSign would definitely be one of the favorites. Um, uh, well, I would say that favorite one. I have to say, based on some of the things I've been, I think a gamification tool. So when I mentioned the inside sales, a tool that the inside sales business dev can use,
Mhm.
gamification. So kind of it's there's a few out there in the market. Gamification creates a sort of competition, healthy competition within the sales development organization, where you can, it's basically you're showing the leaderboard of who
Mhm.
makes the biggest amount of calls, who creates more opportunities, and you get music and you get videos, and they choose. And we need to be aware that a sales development organization is mostly comprised of young people. This is their first job. So you need to make sure that the
Mhm.
environment is cool and fun, because the job can be hard. You need to clean up data and deal with sales attitudes, etc. So creating a gamification and having a gamification tool and getting that hype, in the office with the music going on, with the competition of who's the best, it drives results, believe it or not. So I've in the past few years, I've become a big fan of gamification tools,
Mhm.
uh, of
Can you
gamification.
name one?
So Inside Sales has it
Yeah.
as a native. So it's good, and I've seen it up and running. Um, Ambition is a small company, and I passed the advertising here. Great tool. And 1111 is also another one,
Mhm.
but for sure, Ambition, I've seen it as a very cool interface
Sure.
with videos. So for my colleagues out there, and if they're considering gamification, yeah, have a look at Ambition, a small company, but definitely worth, and integrates with a lot of, with Outreach,
Mhm.
which has become quite popular as well. So it's really cool, the interface.
Are you guys using Ambition at the moment?
We used it at DocuSign, yes.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, moving on. How do you currently deal with data quality, and how does your role interface with the CRM owner?
Yeah, so data quality is an issue, I think, for a lot of companies, right? I think uh, the first thing is there should definitely be a data quality owner that can sit in sales ops, can sit in IT. I don't have a personal, as long as it works, as long as there are initiatives around the clock almost. So that it's not kind of an afterthought that,
Mhm.
oh, if things are looking really bad, then we do some data cleanup. No, it needs to be a constant, as in someone needs to be monitoring, how accounts get created, what standards they need to abide to. A big struggle is to find, there is no such thing, and at least I'm proven wrong. I haven't been proven wrong yet, but there is no such thing as a perfect data provider for North America and international data. I've seen across, and talking with colleagues in the same area, they all struggle. It's very difficult to find, even the likes of DNB. It's very good in terms of North American data, but once we go internationally,
Mm.
especially on smaller companies or even kind of mid-sized companies, the data is not good, the hierarchies are broken. So data is very, very important. So it should be, and I interact a lot. Um, Here, I'm pretty new at Pluralsight, so I'm still trying to understand. But in the past, I've always worked very closely. I didn't have myself the mandate, and thank God, because I have other things to worry about. But obviously, giving suggestions of local data providers for core markets, for example, in Europe, um, there are some companies out there that have become very specialized in certain countries, and you should partner with them and precisely have a data quality team that is constantly driving initiatives around data enrichment, data cleanup, deduping, all of that. It should be a constant,
Hmm.
because data is critical, right, for insights and for the work of any ops person and any decisions on go to market. But if the data is dirty, your insights might be also
Hmm.
incorrect, right? You're not looking at the right trend. So I think it's critical. Um, and oftentimes, data quality is not top of mind for companies, and it should, because it can be your differentiator in the marketplace in terms of getting the right insights out of the
Hmm.
business. If the data is wrong, your conclusions are wrong as well.
Hmm. So taking more of a preventive approach, so it's like doing exercise to prevent getting ill versus taking some pills after you've got ill. Is that a good analogy?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and again, I go back to my military roots. Is like you should plan for the unexpected. And actually, I would say the best sales ops person is the one that doesn't just react to what is going on, is that we're able to predict something that might happen. Because and actually, sales ops people oftentimes are in charge of forecasting, right, with the sales leaders. So you should be pretty good at forecasting the future in a way.
Hmm.
And if you look at trends and then you add some qualitative inputs into it, you can actually say, you know what, if we continue this way, our sales cycle will get longer. If we continue this way, our win rate will go down. So I would say the perfect sales ops person is precisely the one that not just reacts to what is going on,
Hmm.
you kind of predict a little bit the future.
Oh, just writing that down, not just reacting.
And it's not magic. It's literally science and data. You just identify the trend, and then with, because that's the thing. You look at trends and the data, and you add some qualitative inputs because you're there, you're with the reps, and you know what's going on, and then you can infer a scenario for the future. Or maybe, hey guys, if we continue this way, we might go, as I said, we might see a sales cycle going up, or we actually might see a sales cycle going down, or our retention rates will decrease if we continue this way. And I
Hmm.
think that's why sales ops is so important, is to precisely um, anticipate challenges, or anticipate and identify opportunities for growth before they even get you. Um, and that, I mean, that's why I love ops so much. Is precisely the ability to be almost like an oracle of of stuff. I don't want I don't want to be just telling you what's going on, because that's obvious. I want to
Hmm.
tell you what might happen, for the better or for worse. Yeah.
So seeing the future.
Yes.
Um,
And
what would you say is the biggest challenge in your role?
um I wouldn't say I would actually say the most exciting thing is that and at the same time it ends up being a challenge, is that you need to be very cross-functional and cross-departmental, that we can't work in a silo and just see from one perspective. Is precisely that as I said, it becomes a challenge, but also the most exciting thing about this is the fact that you're going to have to work with people that have very different ways of thinking, right? You're going to have to work with finance, who are completely plugged in a different way to sellers. And you're going to have to work with marketing, and they tend to be more creative, and all of that. And sometimes you're going to have to work with product and engineering. And uh, I think it's navigating all these departments and looking from it in a holistic way. So you're almost like looking at everything, and yeah, that is kind of the biggest challenge, but for me it's also the most interesting thing. And as I said, it's we become the kind of impartial, unbiased department that kind of gets everything, that overall view, and say, yeah, if we do this, we're going to have to, work alongside everybody to get to the best, which is at the end of the
Mhm.
day is making the company successful and driving revenue, which is what I'm always thinking about. Making the
So,
company successful.
so right now, the departments you're interfacing with, uh, marketing, obviously sales, customer success, and
Yeah.
finance,
The main ones, yes, I would say. Yep, the
and
main
then any
ones.
others that you'd have to speak with.
IT, yeah,
Okay.
IT would also be obviously to with the dependencies regarding, the CRM platform integrations on systems that have an impact on sales. IT would also be a department that I work with on a
Cool.
regular basis. Yeah.
And second to last question: if you had to choose a single metric to judge your sales reps by, what would you choose?
The sales reps,
Yeah.
I mean, their ability to hit target and their forecast accuracy. That's I'm
Okay,
very
that's two.
basic in terms of I'm very basic in terms of measuring the sales reps.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's their ability to hit their target and their ability to forecast accurately, for sure.
So right now, sales reps are choosing they're forecasting that for their own pipeline.
Yeah, their
Cool.
ability to forecast, to be able to make and I'm kidding in a way, but I'm not, because that's how they are also measured in the company they work for. But um, for sure, their kind of insights of how they run their business. Because sales ops puts out together a lot of insights for the AEs and dashboards, and how is it that they think about the business? You know, how are they structuring their territories? Because we give them their territories, but then the management of the territories, it's up to the AE to decide, right? What accounts they should be looking after. We keep, in some ways we're giving them hundreds of accounts, and we might even develop an account scoring model that helps them out, but in the end it's their decision, right?
Mhm.
They are the CEOs of their own business.
That's a
And
really interesting point. Sorry to jump on that. That's super interesting, and no one's brought that up before.
mhm,
But looking at the salespeople as essentially being their own CEOs and their own profit and loss and their own forecast, that's super interesting.
yeah, because it's funny. I've worked in the past with sales managers that had this attitude, which I completely agree with. Is you're the AEs and the sellers end up being the CEOs of their little company, right? So you have a lot of teams that support you in your day to day. They are not alone, but you're the one making the decision. So look at what you have available and make a decision. Don't expect someone else to make that decision for you.
Mhm.
um, and if they actually pay attention to the metrics they're given and the feedback they're given by sales ops and their customer success people and their AMs and whomever is working, the pre-sales consultants, they can actually make really good decisions, but they need to be the ones making them and thinking strategically about it. And I talk with a lot of AEs, um, and I always say, take time in your calendar to actually think about how to run your business. Don't let it run like on its own, because
Mhm.
you might be lucky to land a big deal and make a ton of money, but you might also not be one of those lucky ones. So you need to think about it. And I'm saying it out of experience.
Mhm.
Take your time to think how to strategize your territory, because nobody's going to
Do it
do
for
that
you.
for you. No, no. Even if we develop, as I said, account scoring
Mhm.
models and all of that, but you're the one talking to the customers. Yeah, not us.
Harsh but true words for the sales for the AE. Okay, finally, who taught you what you know, or is there a person who's guided you the most in respect to sales operations?
I've been fortunate enough to have had really good managers and really good colleagues, uh, peers, or more experienced people. And I've also been very fortunate to work with very experienced and sensible sales leaders that were my partners, and that actually have also positively influenced me
Mhm.
and developed my knowledge in terms of sales operations. So I've been fortunate enough to have more of the good than the bad. I think, for sure, my first manager at BMC Software, Todd, was very important. We had a similar background. He was also a former naval officer, so we had a lot of things in
Mhm.
common. Um, and we thought very similarly. And because it was kind of my first official sales ops role in a company, obviously he was very important. Um, but Julie, my manager at Quantcast, was also really, really impactful. And at DocuSign, I was fortunate enough to have a first manager who was extremely experienced and extremely. He challenged me a lot, and I had a person that wasn't officially my manager, but uh, also taught me a lot.
Mhm.
So I had two very strong sales ops leaders at DocuSign that really, really, despite their experience, they always listened to what I said. They asked me questions. I asked them. Was a very it was amazing. Literally, it was
Mhm.
such a learning experience for me to be exposed to two people so experienced in the area and also so different at the same time, and being exposed to them
Mhm.
on a regular basis was incredible.
Mhm. I like how you referred to the sales leaders as sensible,
Yes.
as if you might not get sensible sales leaders.
Yes. No, I was very fortunate to work with sensible sales leaders who also taught me a lot,
Mhm.
and made my job a lot easier as well.
Sure. Right, I have like so many insights. I'll just run through a couple. I think the biggest one that we haven't heard before is how, as I mentioned, the sales reps or the A's being the CEOs of their own little business, and simply saying that to them, I bet would have such a great impact on their performance, right? Because then they're like, oh, actually, yeah, I am a CEO, and then they'll go back and they'll strategize, and then in theory produce better results. So that was really cool. Um, Also, the best sales ops people predict the future. They don't just react to what's happening. You
Yes.
always need a plan, whether that's plan A, B, or C. Um, Challenge the status quo, and then sales ops being the least biased department in the organization. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing all of that, Cris. That was a really, really intense 40 minutes, and I'm sure that all of our listeners are really going to enjoy that.
My pleasure. It was great talking to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. If you are listening on a podcast listening application, then please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you have any questions about the show, if you know a guest, or if you have any questions about sales operations, just hit me up at tomhunt@ebster.com. That's tomhunt@ebster.com.